Welcome to the Inadequate Mother podcast. I am doing this episode with a guest, the wonderful Claire. She's a confident coach, Claire Elizabeth Coaching. She knows her stuff, and I'm so excited to have her on this episode to talk about something that I wanted to talk about, but I feel like Claire's going to do it in such a more informative way, because I'll just waffle on about how it's affected me and how, I've been enlightened to this side of me. So we're going to discuss codependency. And I think on the podcast, in terms of how we explore ourselves and why we feel inadequate as mothers, why we feel like we don't understand one another and things like that, fundamentally understanding yourself is the biggest solution for that. And I was laughing to myself the other day because I turn 39 tomorrow. So it's my final year in my 30s. So I've been reflecting on like my 30s and what's that meant to me. And I think in your 20s, like my daughter's 18, she's going to be 20 in, 18 months time or however many months. And she's going to be setting on this path of understanding herself as an adult. And in our 20s, we understand ourselves as an adult. But when we are 30, it's almost like to understand yourself truly as an adult, you have to understand yourself as a child. And that to me was always kind of like, well, how do I do that? Like, what do you mean? Everything was all right. It's, it was a bit of a swervy upbringing, but it was who I am today. Why do I need to go and delve into it? And it wasn't until someone said, go and read this book, Codependency No More. It's about how you're wired after being with an alcoholic. Now, my mum passing from alcoholism was clearly a defining moment and a significant moment in terms of how it shaped me. I never really looked at it before her dying. So I never really delved deep enough to understand the lead up to that and how that's probably influenced who I am today more than actually the tragedy of her dying. Because she was never considered an alcoholic, and she never accepted that she was an alcoholic till the day she died. The doctor said, you're an alcoholic, you need to stop drinking. She would not accept it. So for her to be labelled as an alcoholic and for me to say I was raised by an alcoholic, it doesn't fit. I was like, no, she wasn't. She's just a lady that lunched and liked a glass of wine, and so do I, and that's just normal.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we have a similar pattern and like slightly similar story in the sense of my codependency comes. We're both adult children of alcoholics, and similar to you, it's my dad that had the addiction issues with drink. He's now sober. He's been sober about 9 years. But his drinking problem, I wouldn't say was obvious or visible to me, my sisters, or really probably my mum, until we were sort of older. So like teenage years, I started to sort of clock that he was drinking more. But my dad also has never really said, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. Like he was like, no, I just drank too much. But I think the term alcoholic, we visualize someone lying in their vomit, passed out every night, waking up and swigging whiskey. Like when I used to think of an alcoholic, that's how I would think of it, right? But that isn't accurate always. My dad was a completely functioning alcoholic. Yeah. He didn't drink in the morning. He didn't get up and have a glass of wine. He got up, put a suit on and went to work. And it was only, I think, when we grew up, myself and my sisters, and we're living sort of, a different life away from home. And my mum was working quite a lot and he was working from home, that I then think it started to slip into an afternoon drink. And then, I think then, he was a bit pissed by dinner time. And I think, but that, like you said, I don't have the experience of some chaotic alcoholic in my younger childhood. That's not my experience either. but it doesn't mean that it doesn't create the codependent patterns.
You sent me the most beautiful visual image of what codependency is. So what are we saying when we say codependency?
Well, codependency shows up in different ways. So you can be, it can show up as you being a caretaker, a rescuer, a fixer. There's two sides to it. There's always a giver and there's always a taker. And both of you are codependent. The takers tend to be the people that feel that they can't do things on their own, that they always need someone. They fit more into the victim mode. And the givers are we overgive. So I am of the giving side of it. And I think you probably are too.
And how does that come from being in a household or being raised in a household with an alcohol?
So if I just read something that the time I read this, I thought this really sums it up. So codependency is the result of growing up in a family where the most disordered person creates the entire emotional experience of the home. So
that's a really powerful thing. Yeah.
So how I read that is, yeah, my dad did create the entire emotional experience of our home. And where the codependency starts is because it starts a pattern of being hypervigilant. Like, is he happy today? Is he cross today? Has he had a drink? Can I broach that subject today? And it starts this pattern of, for me, it started a pattern of feeling responsible for people's feelings in the house and trying to really subconsciously, none of this was conscious, sort of mediate. And if I saw that he was in, a mood where he might get cross or, have had a few to drink, I would change the way I was behaving so that he maybe wouldn't. And it just creates this pattern of sort of slight chaos of up and down, and being very aware and thinking, I can fix this, or I'm responsible for this. And a lot of it is subconscious and we don't realize at the time.
How old were you, would you say, during those times?
My memories of being conscious, I have some early memories of my dad doing some things that left me feeling upset and a bit unsafe, not in the sense that he was scaring me or anything like that, but in the sense of like I didn't feel very protected by him. And at the time, I didn't realize that he was probably had a drink because I was like 8. But
you don't understand alcohol that way.
No, but I reflect back to the memory and thinking he must have had a couple to drink. And that's why he behaved like that, because who my dad is truly, he wouldn't behave like that. So I think it was affecting me from quite a young age. But I think that, and that's where a lot of the patterns began for me of many different things: codependency, feeling stuck in a masculine energy, thinking I have to protect myself, that I can't lean on people, that I can't lean on men. A lot of those patterns started then. But I think really when it all shifted a gear and it became more severe, I wasn't living in the home, but there were incidences where I came back and that sort of charged energy was in the home of, don't get on the wrong side of dad,
Yeah. So me and you, we've discussed, we're clearly codependent. We're clearly being labelled as the caring type. And that's sometimes, I think, misunderstood, isn't it? Because I would do things and people would say, you're so good, you're so nice, you're so kind. But then there'd be something inside me that goes, this is what I need though. Why do I need it? I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me. And it's having that reflection, that real deep reflection where you're like, I'm not a good person. I'm just doing this for me.
I propped up an entire identity over it. Like my 20s where I was.
Is that why you're a coach?
So prior to being a coach, in my early to mid 20s, I had no boundaries. I was known as the friend that everybody came to in crisis because I was really good at managing drama. No shit, because I'd had lots of practice. And I liked it. I thrived off it. We were talking about the two different sides of codependency, and there's the superior side where you are a bit of a martyr and you feel like you know more than and you're better than, and it's subconscious. I didn't go around thinking, oh, I'm so sorted and they're so broken. Like it definitely wasn't a conscious thing, but I did seem to attract a lot of broken people that were struggling, who could do things for themselves but felt they couldn't, and therefore was like, can you help me? And then I would go around with absolutely zero boundaries, helping lots of people that were in need of help without any training. I wasn't a coach. I hadn't trained in anything, but everyone was like, but you're just good at this stuff. And like you said, it feels good in the sense of validation of, I'm such a kind person. I'm a really good problem solver. And it starts to create this identity of who you think you are. And then I started to be trained to be a therapist, like a counselor in my mid-20s. And I did 2 levels of that, which was like about a year and a half, I think. And I started to be like, oh, oh, shit.
Oh, the need to be needed isn't necessarily good. So I think we need to clarify, the need to be needed is not a good
Well, no, because it sends you into lots of dynamics that aren't healthy for you. So it sends you into friendships that are draining, where you will get resentful. And resentful is a really low vibration. It's not a nice feeling to feel. It sends you towards partners that are really not good for you, that will over lean on you and you will overgive. And the key with all of this is your needs will never get met. Because you're overgiving to such a level, and they're never going to be grateful enough, because half the time they haven't even asked for the help. This was the thing in my 20s. I would just get involved. I was just in that zone of, oh, I can help you. I'll do this. I'll do that. And they hadn't even asked. And that's where it moves into the slightly martyr superior bit. So now that I am developed, self-developed, and I know my patterns and I have healthy boundaries, I don't do it at all in friendships or anything like that. But you and I have discussed this prior to this call, that it both shows up for us in romantic relationships. And it shows up for me with my daughter when she is struggling. I really naturally move towards, instead of just sitting and listening, let me fix that for you. And I have to really, it's a real internal battle to not jump into Little Miss Fix It and to just let her be heard, because she doesn't want me to fix it. She wants me to hear her. And romantic relationships, if you're in that sort of energy, naturally, you will tend to attract, for me, men that are in quite a feminine energy, not very good at leading, not protective, don't make decisions very easily, lean on me a lot, don't do much, and then I do a lot. And then again, the same pattern of needs not being met happens. And then usually I leave the relationship. So that's where it has still been a pattern for me, but it's super healthy in every other area. And I'm in therapy now to be like, but why? Why have I still not got through that? Like, why is that still happening? And I think it's just a lifelong battle. I think if you're wired that way, it's hard to constantly be like, oh, am I doing this from a place of like authenticity? Or like you said, am I doing it because it makes me feel good,
Yeah, everyone's different. So you can't go at things with I'm going to be a healed codependent person and I'm going to have healthy detachments and boundaries and what have you. And you can't go at it in the same way with every single person the same way, because every single person is completely unique and different. So it's about working out what that person is like and what their boundaries and needs are, and just understanding where you can meet in a healthy way. And sometimes that means full detachment. Sometimes that, it's going to differ, and it's going to differ on a different day as well. And for me, I think, for example, I've got a lifelong friend. And I know you said that you've kind of put a stop to it with friendships, but I'm talking like she's been my friend for 35 years. So she's like, and she's also one of the best people in the world. So if something happens to her, my codependency flares up like you wouldn't believe. but another person it wouldn't. So I'm like scarcely aware of when it flares up. And one way I'm aware of it is my inner monologue. It goes off and like it'll be talking about her problem. I'll be discussing in my head. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I still thinking about the problem that my friend's experiencing? And I think that's a good indicator.
Yeah, you're really right, because I have the same thing. I used to have the same thing, especially in my teenage and 20s with my younger sister. And I was the same. Her problems became my problems, and I would feel them on a level like deeply, where it would emotionally and physically bother me, even though it was her issue. So her getting dumped by a boyfriend would upset me to the point that I'd feel sick and I couldn't eat my dinner. Yeah. Whereas
it's crazy.
I'm not sure that's normal. I think you can be, and I think that is being an empath with no boundaries. And my sister and me, I think we had a very codependent relationship throughout her early 20s, my teenage years. Since we were kids, we were really close, and I took on this role of being her protector. And it was really, really interesting because we had a conversation very recently to do around childhood anxiety, because she used to really battle with anxiety as a child. And I, talking about how it affects us, it felt unbearable for me. Her feeling anxious felt so unbearable for me that I just wanted her to not feel anxious. So I took it as my responsibility to help her to not feel anxious. But I was also very hyper aware of it and hyper vigilant. So when other people didn't see that she was, I would. And we spoke recently, and she said, first of all, she said a lot of it I was kind of faking, like I was exaggerating it so I didn't have to go to school because I just didn't want to go. And I was like, oh. And she was like, oh no, I did sometimes feel ill, but some of the time I didn't. And then she said, and also you were the only one that ever saw it. And she said, and that was really kind that you saw it. But she said, but sometimes it just didn't help. And I thought, wow. You know, and you have one of those visceral moments where you've spent decades thinking that you're helping that person, and actually they've just told you as a grown adult that sometimes that actually wasn't that helpful. And it was really great for me because it was a pivotal time with my daughter where I was like, some of the things I'm doing might not actually be helping her. I'm probably hindering her.
Would you say that you have experienced a lot of resentment? Do you struggle with resentment as a result of being so connected to someone's feelings that you resent their feelings? Or like you said, you want them to stop, you want them to fix and do everything that maybe you do for them to not experience those things, and then get resentful that they're not doing those things?
I think in my 20s, before self-development, that's when I would get resentful. So I would get annoyed that my sister or my friends were going back to boyfriends that had been awful to them. And I was like, oh, for God's sake, what are you doing? Like, no empathy, just like, come on. Like, and I think
like you're making a bad choice for us right now.
Like, as in, I felt like I would make better choices until the universe liked to throw me a big curveball a few years later. And did I make better choices? No, I did not.
No.
So I think that in my 20s, I think that was my era of just no boundaries, resentment, overgiving, slight martyr zone. And my 30s were completely the decade of just growth, because I got pregnant with my daughter at 30 and I left my husband 8 weeks pregnant. So I went through the biggest heartbreak and development shift of my life in that year up until I was 40. So those 10 years were just completely self-developing, therapy, training to be a coach, coaching lots of women, helping lots of women, and in turn helping myself. Because when you learn about other people's patterns, you're like, wow, I do that.
Have you talked to your sister about this in any detail? Because in a way, I mean, it's clear, like from understanding codependency, that we're not just caring, we're actually problematic in the fact that we're taking away from their ability to develop resilience and grow. So we're growing and we're doing this, and then we're saving them, and then what happens is then they become incapable because they've been robbed of the opportunity to sort things themselves.
I don't think we never had a conversation where I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. You're quite capable. But what ended up happening is we both got married around a similar time. And something in that made me feel like she's married and she's settled now. I can sort of I can step back. And I just organically stepped back and stopped with all the getting involved. I was just getting involved in stuff that didn't involve me. And I think there was occasions where she would get pissed off with me, like quite rightly, like it's none of your business, like, you know. And I think so probably a couple of things, but I don't remember. We've never sat down. I think most recently we had that conversation where she said it didn't really help. And I was like, oh, wow. But there was no conversation of, you are not, you know, I didn't sit there and say, you are not gaining the emotional skills that you need because I'm doing it all for you. There was none of that, because she just naturally grew up, gained those skills, went through life difficulties herself, which really helped her build her own skills. It just organically happened. I think by my sort of 27 onwards, I'd stepped back. And she did. I think I saw quite quickly that she was doing a lot better when I was just not getting involved.
And building your trust in one another as well. It's kind of like, I think we have to trust these ones we love. Like, and if we don't have trust, how can you have, like, you know, true love and respect for each other? And yeah, I think it's just, yeah, I find it difficult. And I think I've identified it in my romantic relationships. Like we've had many talks on how that's played out, and that's quite easy to understand. You've got what I would call a wootless man, or, you know, a trauma bond, and, you know, you're a savior. And, you know, we've spoke about how I'm now having to understand how to be in a healthy relationship where there's no trauma bond. I don't need to save them. They don't desire me or need me to an extent which is really intense and frankly very stimulating.
Yeah.
And I'm now like, oh,
yeah,
this is boring.
I'm still on that journey. So I'm like you, navigating, looking for my life partner who is secure, grounded in a masculine energy, protective, leading, all the things I've never had.
Codependent. Go with someone that's codependent.
So I had one boyfriend who was like, I class him as the nice boyfriend. He was very generous, very giving, very loving, very kind, but codependent as fuck. And it used to irritate me because he was very codependent with his parents, and they would click their fingers and he would run. And I'd be like, you're a 40-year-old man, like, grow up.
Yeah.
Like, and so all the things and the blessings that it brought to my relationship, like all the kindness and all that stuff, it started to bother me because I didn't think it came from an authentic place. And I could see that, you know, talk about the shadow self. I could see 25-year-old Claire in him. Like those patterns of doing it completely subconsciously, not knowing he was propping up his whole identity on being kind and giving. And I could see he was getting resentful and fed up. And I just, at that point of my journey, I was still very in a masculine energy. And we were just clashing because all of his giving and protectiveness I found suffocating. So now I'm at a point where I would love, not a codependent man, but I would love a protective, leading, kind, caring man. Like I have an open heart for that right now. But that's probably the only time in my life I have had that.
There was an element that enjoyed it because it was maybe a role reversal where you were getting back everything that you'd normally be giving. So I really relate to that. It's a dynamic that your brain isn't wired for. So then am I a commitment phobe? Am I like put off? Or this is what I've been wanting. Now, it's not genuine because he's codependent. Do I need to fix him? Here's a book about codependency. Like, no.
Yeah, I think what was really interesting in that relationship, where I have never given so little in a relationship, to the point that I actually reflect and think I was quite a bad partner. Like
How long were you with him for?
we were together twice, the poor guy. Once for about, I want to say 18 months. No, a year. And then we split up for 18 months because I ended it. Because I was just like, no, don't want you. Too suffocating. Gone off you. No. We split up for 18 months. I dated a couple more assholes and then was like, oh, he was such a good guy, actually. Like, he's such an idiot. Why did I end that? And then we sort of reconnected really randomly on my birthday. And that ended up basically leading up to a conversation. He was in a relationship with somewhere else, where a conversation where he was just like, I don't think I realized this, but I'm still in love with you. I feel like I never processed the breakup because he just kind of went from one to the other, which is quite a codependent thing, right? And so we very quickly ended up entangled again in another relationship. And this relationship was much healthier because I appreciated him a lot more and I was giving more, but it still wasn't a good fit long term. Like, we just didn't have enough in common. And I think that he needed to go on his own journey. And I probably had self-developed to such a level that we weren't on the same timeline anymore. So we were together again for about 1.5 years, I think. And then that ended. And like, he was just the loveliest guy. And where I'm grateful for him was, I think he taught me how I deserve to be treated. Like, actually, that is the norm. Like, that is the norm. A man should be protective and caring of his partner. And, you know, I just never had that. I'd never gone out with guys that were like, oh, how are you getting home? Do you want me to pick you up? Or can you text me when you're in a taxi? They just saw me as such an independent woman that they just didn't need to worry about me. And as women, and I've realized this in my 30s, in my 20s, I was fine with that. Now I'm like, I want someone to worry about me. I want to be in a relationship where they're like, how are you getting home? Or like, you know what I mean? That would kind of be protective. And if something happened, come in, look after me. And that is growth, because it used to make me feel icky. Like, oh, I don't need someone to look after me. Gross. No. Like, and now I'm so different from that. And that is, you know, many relationships where I've learned lessons, good and bad, and just getting more and more to know myself. And like you said, how you're saying your 30s are for your childhood stuff. Buckle up, babe, for your 40s.
A destination, is there? There's not an ending to kind of growth. As long as it's a upward journey and it's, you know, a progression, that's what life is. It's not you're not going to hit a wall.
Well, and you being now in such a healthy relationship, if this is your first healthy relationship, I think it's really true to say that your first healthy relationship after many unhealthy ones will be the hardest one, because you are fighting against so much wiring that's been there for decades. So if you are somebody who is listening to this and relating to it and thinking, oh God, I think I have those tendencies, there's definitely things that you can do. The very first thing I would always say is get curious about it, but without judgment. Like, don't sit there and start judging yourself for all the times that you've done stuff that you now think hasn't benefited you. Get really curious about it and be like, why did I do that? Do I think I did that from a place of authenticity? Did I actually genuinely really want to help that person? Or, you know, and just kind of get curious about it and have a think about maybe past experiences, past relationships, past friendships, dynamics where maybe you think you slipped into this. I would ask yourself a few questions. I would always advise you do this if you can afford it, with a therapist or a coach. But if you can't, you know, pen and paper, get journaling, write things down. Think about maybe where these patterns began. Why do I think I did this? What's my first memory of doing this? What's my first memory of people pleasing, feeling responsible for other people's feelings? Get curious about it. Then I would have a look at your boundaries, because I'm going to guess that you don't have very good ones currently. If you are someone with codependent tendencies that hasn't had therapy or hasn't done much self-development, and start working on your boundaries. A key thing that codependent people do is say yes when they mean no. Is say yes to doing things and helping people when they don't actually want to, or they're too tired and they're too burnt out, but they feel like they can't say no. So start asking yourself, How much am I saying yes when I actually want to say no? And start being authentic and really real with it. Now, that might make your life smaller. You might be like, well, actually, I don't really want to do 80% of what I'm doing. Just start with that. Start living a bit more authentically with what you're saying yes and no to. Check your boundaries. Check who in your life oversteps them. Who do you feel at the moment is, draining your energy when you spend time with them, taking a lot from you? Who are you over giving to? And review that friendship or relationship and start setting new boundaries with that person. A really good sentence that I use when my codependency flares up with friends or partners or my child is, you've got this. I trust you're going to get the answer to this. I trust that you're going to find your way with this. I'm here to listen, but I trust you're going to find the way through this. Because what it does is it puts the ownership back on them. It makes them also feel a bit empowered, like, yeah, maybe I do know the answer to this, rather than, what do you think I should do? Check your language, how you're responding to friends that, tend to go into victim mode, be a bit more takey with their energy. Start checking your language. They're the key things I'd start with, because you don't want to do too much at once. And the thing with this codependency stuff, also read Codependent No More, the book, because that is an amazing book and it made me open my eyes a lot. Also, the Holistic Psychologist on Instagram. She's an amazing person to follow. She does a lot of work around codependency, family dynamics, childhood trauma. And I learned a lot from her. And I think that once you discover it, you can't unsee it. And so once you know about it, and you'll know this, Hayley, too, you'll be like, oh God, I'm doing it again.
Yeah, and I think it flares up in different ways in different relationships, and that's the thing that you will learn over time. It's not something that's going to come to you overnight, because it will look different in every single person. To add on to, I think, what you've perfectly given in terms of some tips, I would say, for me, when you read the book or you study codependency, detachment is the thing that you learn about, and boundaries. Now, I'm someone that's always had low boundaries, and I find my biggest revelation has been understanding the difference between internal boundaries and external boundaries, i.e. the behaviours that we do to kind of keep someone at arm's length, and the internal, emotional and mental boundaries that we can make happen within us by not allowing that person, no matter how close they are to us, to impact us and to penetrate us emotionally. So that's going to take some time, because the simple way and the easy way is just to push someone away, or not return their calls, or say I need space, or what have you. But we don't want to push people out our lives. We live in a world where we're too, individually driven. We want people around us, but it is the internal work for us to put in those emotional barriers and those emotional boundaries where we don't allow other people to affect us. And it is our job and our work on ourselves.
Something I would say about boundaries, just a reminder, when people that are massive people pleasers or have quite low self-esteem, especially women I coach, struggle with boundaries because they feel like they're being rude or being mean, or, they're like, oh, my family aren't going to get this. How I always explain it is, boundaries aren't there to cut people out of your life. Boundaries are there to teach people how to love you. And if they don't want to love you in the way that you are stating with these boundaries, then that's their choice. But it's not you pushing them out of your life. You're saying, I want you to stay in my life, but to stay in my life, can we have this? Can our dynamic change? Could there be more of this? Could there be less of this? It's teaching people how to love you and have a relationship with you. It's not cutting people off. And it's a good sentence to say to people when people are struggling with your new boundaries, which they will, because they'll be like, what's going on? That's you just say, I'm just teaching you, I want you to stay in my life, and I'm teaching you how to be in my life, and you can teach me how to be in your life. What are your boundaries? And it's just a healthy conversation.
That it's important for them to understand as well their codependency. And I think emotional manipulation is probably something that you need to explore with this, and where that plays in the relationship. As a caregiver, you might be emotionally manipulative, and vice versa. As the victim, you might be using that, and it's just about having that control to not respond to that and understand it from your own perspective. For this section, I just want us to talk about how it might rear its head in our parenting as mothers, because for me, this is the newest era in terms of exploring myself, how I am as a mom to an adult child. And it's the most scariest thing for someone that's codependent to know that my child is going off into the world, going to live in a different city. I'm freaking out. Like, I am really trying to zone down and work on this codependency, because I'm like, it's going to be a case of she's going to call, be upset, and I'm going to be in the car driving to Bath. I know it. I'm going to be that mom. And I really need to accept that she's got to sit in her own emotions. She's got to sit in her own fuck up. She's got to sit in her own sadness, in a way. Like, me being around the most precious thing to me, and them being sad, it kills me.
It's so painful. How we were talking about how we feel with friends and sisters, etc. I feel Violet, my daughter's pain, like it's my own.
Yeah.
And I totally relate to that. I would really struggle. My daughter's she's coming up to 10. But I think, the going to uni and being in another city, and us having because we're single mums, like there is like a thread and a connection that is intense, because we've been there everything for a lot of the time. And, my daughter has a relationship with her dad. I'm sure your girls have a good relationship with their dad, but that living just with a mum, a very female environment, there's an intuitiveness and there's just a connection. And I think that my advice with that stuff, first of all, I'm down the road from Bath, so if she's having a drama,
oh my God,
I'm a codependent, so she can call me.
Claire, please help me.
I'm literally like, I went to school and grew up in Bath, so I'm down just down the road. But it's key techniques that I would use is, like I said, using the sentence like, darling, you've got this. It's going to feel uncomfortable. If she's really feeling in crisis, so that would be exceptionally difficult for mothers like you and I. How I would do it was I would say, get some sleep. Say it's a nighttime call. She's hysterical. I need you, mum. I'd be like, get some sleep. If you still feel the same in the morning, then I'll come up. Like, give her time to regulate, because she's going to be very used to deregulating and going, mum, help me. My daughter does it all the time. Make me feel better, regulate me.
But that's the problem with my daughter. She doesn't. That's what makes it 10 times worse. Is because she's fiercely independent and she doesn't ask for help easy. So for me, I'm like on the outside going, let me help you, let me help you. And she's just like, no. Because I think as well, because she probably knows I'm codependent, and she's always saying, Mum, it's not about you. When we realise that we're codependent, there'll be a lot of minimising thoughts we have about ourselves that are linked to the fact that we're codependent, i.e. it's all about you, and my trauma isn't your trauma, and you're all a bit too much, or you're a bit too invasive, or you're a bit too open, or you're a bit too... what's the word? I don't know. There'll just be lots of minimizing thoughts that niggle away at you. And I think it's important to realize that, yes, you might be codependent, but that is who you are. And you have got to love yourself and the journey that's made you who you are. And as long as you have a good intention of heart, i.e., you're able to stop, hear people, actively listen, reflect, get rid of all those negative thoughts you've got about yourselves, because that's not going to help anyone.
We as mothers, our job is not to guide their happiness. Our job is to give them all the skills, which it sounds like you've done a great job of that, teaching your kids the skills that they will need to go into the big wide world and find their own happiness. And they won't use those, they won't know those skills till they flex them. And it will take a drama. It will take someone breaking their heart. It will take all those things to start building those skills. I talk about with confidence coaching a lot. People aren't born confident. You build confidence through competence. So she probably will initially go to uni and have a bit of a panic. I sound very similar to your daughter. So I am someone that never used to ask for help, ever. Never would tell my mum or dad if I was upset or missed home, or would just completely hold it in. And I had to build up skills to deal with it on my own. Now, the key thing is with her, I would say, is monitoring that she isn't doing that too much. So how I would deal with it is, I know that you've got this. I know that you don't ask for help much and that you're really amazing at dealing with things on your own, but know that I am always at the end of the phone and you can always call me, and I'm not going to mind. And like, it's just clearly giving her that option that I know you're great at managing your emotions and dealing with life, but I'm still your mum. And there might be times you need me, and that's okay. I want you to reach out when you need me. And I think it's just as simple as that. She sounds like she's got her head screwed on, and she's probably just going to have a great time. But there will be probably moments where there'll be a bit of a wobble. And I think that, she will. It sounds like she's already got a lot of skills that she needs to go out into the adult world from what you've taught her.
She's an absolutely incredible child. And when I named this podcast The Inadequate Mother, she got quite upset and she was like, oh, that's a reflection of me. Why have you called it that? And I was like, no, babe. The very fact that I have the confidence to say this is The Inadequate Mother is because of how amazing you are. Like, I must have done something right. But throughout the whole process, I felt completely inadequate because all mothers feel inadequate.
Oh my God, and every day.
As single parents that are codependent, let's say, there's a combination there that's kind of, you will overcompensate for the fact that you're a single parent in a way that feeds your codependency. So understanding how those two go together, okay, I'm compensating for the fact that it's just me. And I'm codependent, so I need to kind of make everything right and make everything good and make everything happy and make up for the fact that there's just me. There's all that to deal with as well. And even if there's parents out there that are listening that maybe, I think there's a lot of parents that sometimes use money and gifts and things like that as part of their codependency to say, oh my God, you're sad. Okay, what do you want? And then they just give. And I think that's a really big thing in society, is that kids now, they're wired to want things. They're wired to want this and wired to want that. If they don't get it, if they don't get that hit of happiness, they're sad. And a codependent parent can't deal with that. They've got to go to work. I can't take on your sadness. How do I fix that? What's the quickest way? I'm just going to give you what you need. And it's like not allowing that child to sit in that sadness and realize that actually you wanting something shouldn't really make you sad. And me not being, and as a parent, not being able to sit in that, oh God, my child's sad, uncomfortable feeling because I've got to go to work and I've got to be okay. And then just having that quick fix.
You're totally right. Like, my daughter has ADHD, so she is all about the dopamine hits from buying things. It's a problem. And I think that it's working out, like, does she want this crappy thing that she's seen on YouTube that if I buy it within 5 minutes, she'll have forgotten about it? Or is she craving my attention? And it's looking between the lines, because if they're, scrolling or looking for things they want to buy, they're often distracting themselves from feelings they're uncomfortable with.
That's so true.
So read between the lines, like, darling, what's going on? Like, ask, how are you feeling? Have you had a tough day?
And that comes down to our communication style as well, and trying to make sure that those communication channels stay open.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge in itself, but we won't go into all that.
All kids normally want is connection and attention. Now, when they're teenagers, it's really difficult because they're going through lots of big hormonal shifts where they do need you and they do want that connection, but they're also pushing you away because they're trying to find their own way in the world. And it's really difficult. And I imagine for you to kind of find that middle ground of like, I can see they need me and they want that emotional connection, but they're also not letting me. And it's really difficult to navigate that. But I think most of the time they just want to be seen or heard, or a back tickle, or if they don't want to talk, kiss on the head, love you. Like, they just want to know that you're there. And I think that it's really tricky to navigate, and to not, like you said, to not go into, I'm a bad parent because I didn't buy them that thing that all their friends have got. And that's another story, isn't it? The comparison culture. But yeah.
This episode has been hopefully enlightening to someone that's maybe never heard of the term codependency, because I certainly hadn't until I got given that book. I think it is something that needs to be talked about more, because we can understand how we connect with one another, how we connect in our romantic relationships, but more importantly, how we're going to connect with our children, and how we're going to allow them to develop the emotional resilience they need, all the life experience they need, without us having complete anxiety, bloody breakdowns. And also, let's not resent our kids, because I think as well on this podcast, we're going to talk about how it can be really easy to end up resenting your kids when you are a controlling person. And I don't want that to happen to anybody, because that is not good. So guys, thank you so much, Claire. And if anybody would like to be coached, it's not just confidence you cover it.
My niche.
You know way too much just to cover confidence.
Yeah, so my niche is self-esteem, confidence, self-doubt. If you battle with catastrophizing perfectionism, but I also do like relationship dating coaching, which will always link into your self-esteem anyway. So yeah, I mainly coach women, but I'm open to coaching men. And I do like sort of one-off sessions, or I do like 3-month coaching. I also have a podcast myself, which I'll get tagged in this so you can have a listen, which is all about women's confidence journeys.
Yeah, so you invite guests on and you talk to every woman about how she's grown in her confidence journey.
Yeah, we look at women that have had lots of sort of main pivotal life confidence moments, and how those moments have shaped their confidence journey. Golden nuggets of advice that they've learned, looking at their childhood patterns. It's a real it's just a really intimate conversation, really.
Brilliant. Claire, thank you so much for talking about codependency with me.
You're welcome.
Thanks, and I hope you get to your school run okay.
All right, love. Speak soon.